What's going on, friends? Welcome back to the fourth video in our 6-part series on how to build a marketplace without code. Now, in the previous 3 videos, we started off by going over how to build your landing page in Webflow so that you can start promoting your marketplace platform to potential customers and to even get them to express interest by filling out a contact form. Then we moved on to the second tool, which is Airtable, that allows us to build a backend or a database for our marketplace, which means that as you start getting more inquiries, as you start getting more application from talent, you're actually building it on top of a system that will allow you to scale and be organized. And then in the last video, we also went over how to use make.com to automate your marketplace workflows. Now, up until this point, this is really all you need in order to get started. The next tool that I'm going to be introducing in this series is called Glide, and it's a tool that we're going to be able to use to build user portals. But before we get into it, I do want to be clear that at this point, there's no need to build any user portals if you don't really have users. The idea behind using these tools is to allow you to do what is already working at a larger scale. It's also important to keep in mind that as you bring more tools into the mix, your burn rate will increase. So you want to have a certain degree of certainty that your marketplace business is going to work and that you are going to be able to generate enough money from it in order to run this site sustainably. Now, what are we going to be covering in today's video? First of all, we're going to be having a quick little look at Glide. I'll explain what it is. Then I'm going to show you specifically how I'm using it on the Unicorn Factory. I'm going to show you my Freelancer portal and my client portal. I'm going to be diving into some of the features that I have. Then we're going to dive into the Glide 101. So how do you set up customer portals? What are some of the main features, that type of stuff. Then, okay, so Glide is a no-code builder that allows you to build apps, essentially. Now, just to clarify the difference between what we've done so far and what we're going to be doing in this particular tool, when we set up Webflow, we were mostly focused on creating the front end or the interface of our marketing site. When we jumped into Airtable, we were mostly working on the backend and the organization of data in our platform. And when we started working with make.com, we started to think about automation and logic. With Glide, we are going to be using all of those aspects of building apps in one tool. So if we have a quick look at the overview here, you can see that it is structured in a very similar way to Webflow. So on the left side, we can see our navigation, and every item within our navigation menu reflects a different page within your app. So in this particular example, I have created a portal for hiring chess coaches. It has pages for different programs that are going on. It's got a coaches directory, and it's really essentially like a marketplace business. You can review different coaches and message them. So in a way, very similar to some of the Unicorn Factory functionality. Now, the next aspect so this is really the first aspect. You can basically build pages, and then you can configure pages with data that sits inside of your database. And unlike Webflow, you are somewhat limited in terms of what it is that you can add to your canvas, but they do have a lot of components that allow you to build really nice looking apps. So, if you wanted to drag in a text component, you could just easily drag it in here, and you'll see it then reflected in there. There's some stylistic changes that you can make. Again, similar to Webflow, your styling in the CSS panel is kind of on the right side here. And you can then just go and build an app in whatever way you want. Now, the next component in this is the data. Now, the data tab works in a very similar way to, say, Airtable. You've got a base, which in this case is our entire app. And then within our app, we have a bunch of tables that we can use to import data. Now, we're going to be using this imported data to essentially create our layout. So whenever we're creating a grid with all of our coaches, what we're actually doing here is we're referencing the data inside of our coaches table that we have imported into our base. Now, you may notice that there are different icons on each table. You can see, for example, here we've got a database icon. We also have a Glide icon with this table. And up here, you'll see we also have an Airtable icon that is connected to our table. Now, one of the things that you can do in Glide that is awesome is actually connect different data sources to your app. So if you've already started building out your marketplace platform with an Airtable database, then what you'll be able to do is actually use your Airtable data and import it directly into your Glide app. And for me personally, that was a huge drawing point, because that means that you don't actually need to set your database up from scratch. You can just continue on with the existing data that you have inside of your app. Now, one more thing that's important to note, and that is very specific to apps, we also have a table for our users. Now, you can see that the students table is our users table based on the icon that is attached to this table. But what this table allows us to do is to essentially create individual logins for the different users in our table. And so you can see here that when I jump into the layout mode, that I have a button that says viewing as Christine Kim. Now, what that is it's basically an overview of all of the logged in users. So if, for example, I wanted to personalize a dashboard, I could simply drop some text in here, and I could say something along the lines of, hey, and then I could drop, for example, someone's first name in here, and you can then see it says, hey, Christine. And then when I switch from the one logged in user to another, you'll see how all of the text automatically updates. And this is really where something like Glide becomes an incredibly handy tool, because now we can actually allow our customers to self-serve on our platform. And so ultimately we have the tools to allow users to log in and to basically do whatever it is that they need to do in our marketplace platform. Now, before I jump in to show you how the Unicorn Factory portals look, there's one more component that I want to show you, which is a reasonably new Glide feature, which is workflow. And this essentially takes care of the logic behind how certain actions work on your platform. Now, if you recall, when we went over how automation tools work, you essentially have triggers and then you have actions. So once again, triggers can be anything like when someone submits a form, or when someone, when a status changes inside of your Airtable base, and then you can configure a set of actions to follow after that. The same logic applies here in Glide as well. However, there are a few different ways that you can trigger workflows. One is on a schedule. So let's say, for example, once a day you want to send your customers an email reminding them about, messages that they may have received. Then there is webhook triggers, which is similar to what we did in one of the tutorials when we went over make.com, but we can essentially configure a webhook endpoint that we can send data to. So if, for example, we said, hey, when we switch a freelancer in our portal to status live, then trigger this webhook and then update their profile information. And then finally, there's also app interaction, which basically means that it starts a workflow when a user presses a button. Okay, and so what we'll do is, for example, drop a button in here, and then we can just simply either use any of the default actions that comes with Glide, and there are a lot of them. It's really awesome. Or you can set up custom workflows where you can say, hey, when someone clicks that particular button, I want you to take a set of actions. And so you can then go ahead and integrate it with all of their different tools. They've got a whole bunch of awesome AI features. They've got a ton of amazing integrations. And so really, I could make a 5-hour-long video explaining how Glide works, but just for the sake of showing you what it's all about at the high level, let's now jump into looking what an actual app looks like in practice. So let's jump into the Unicorn Factory portals. Okay, so as I have a two-sided marketplace, I actually have two different portals. One portal is for my clients, and then the other portal is for my freelancers. So let's first of all start off with the client portal. Now, one of the things that you won't see in this particular setup is the sign up and onboarding flow. So when a client signs up, we'll ask them a bunch of questions, and then we'll basically guide them through an educational process to kind of show them how our platform works. But as soon as they've been verified, this is essentially what their portal looks like. So in here, they'll find a few things. Number one, messages, which is an overview of all of the inquiries that they have sent to freelancers on our platform. Then past projects that they have posted to our job board. And I'm actually going to show you how our process for creating new job listings in just a second. But then they also have access to the directory that has search and filtering functionality, where they can, for example, look for certain freelancers, and then they can go ahead and message them if they want, and basically interact with freelancers on our platform. We also have some premium features that we give some freelance clients access to as well, where they'll be able to get some additional information on certain freelancers, like their rates and their availability and all those types of things. And then we also have a resource library that pulls information from our blog and from Airtable into their app, so that they can just go ahead and get caught up on the best practices of hiring freelancers. Now, one of the main reasons why we created this is simply because oftentimes when people are hiring people, they will want to update information. And so one of the first and key features is the ability to update profiles, so they can just jump in here, they can configure their information, and they'll be good to go. We also have integrated a set of AI features that allow us to basically figure out what a client's hiring preferences are, and then match them up with freelancers on our platform based on that. And so this is what this section here looks like. They can just come and tell us what their preferences are, and then we will filter for the right freelancers based on that. So a real specific example is that if a client only wants to hire someone on an hourly rate, well, we're not going to introduce them to freelancers who are essentially only doing project-based work. Now, one of the features that I am probably most proud of is our job listing tool. So this tool here was this was a huge problem before I introduced this tool. Clients just wouldn't post high quality job listings, and as a result, freelancers wouldn't want to apply. So we created a tool that really streamlines that process. And so the way it works is they could just tell us what they're looking for. So in this case, I'd say, I'm looking for a thumbnail designer for some upcoming YouTube videos. I want someone to be able to design them in Figma. No, not Figma, in Canva. Let's say Canva or Figma, whatever. So this is kind of the level of quality that our posts used to have, but now I basically just created this little questionnaire and asked them, hey, how much are you going to pay for it, and what's your range, all that kind of stuff. And then as soon as they have all of that, we are actually going to use an AI tool to basically look into our database, check out all of the most successful job listings, and to create a project brief that will attract more freelancers. And so this is essentially what it looks like. It's fully editable, so clients can remove sections that they might not need. If they want to change their budgets, they can just jump in and edit it. It gives it a very nice, unique title that basically looks at the context of who the client is and also what they specified in their project description. And then as soon as they've done that, they can upgrade their job listing if they want. But from there, it's just a matter of posting the job to our portal. We'll then receive it on the back end, and then it will automatically get reviewed, published, and then in here, they'll be able to see who all of the different freelancers are who have applied for the job. Now, the flip side of all of this is the freelancer portal. So again, we have a sign up and an application process that freelancers will go through. We also have an onboarding process where we kind of explain how it all works. But once they've gone through this process, this is what the freelancer portal will look like. So the first thing is the ability to apply for jobs on our site. So when they come in here, they'll get access to our job board. It has a few filters, and they can kind of find whatever it is that they want. And then if they want to apply for a job, they can jump in, review the details. If they're interested, just click on apply for this job, specify why they're a good fit, give us a rough estimate, and then hit the submit button. From there, we'll add the freelancer to the client's shortlist to review to see whether or not they're the type of people that they want to hire for the job. And then if the client is interested in working with them, we'll make an email introduction to keep it nice and simple. Now in here, we also have built a CRM for our freelancers where they can basically keep an eye on how things are going. Now, unfortunately, I never get work through this site, so, there's not a lot to show, but as soon as you get to the point where you're getting 50, 60 leads, a quarter, you want to get organized, and so that's essentially what this part does. Actually, here's an overview of what what it looks like, and you've got filters and all that kind of stuff, just so that people know I don't close deals all the time, but it just allows them to manage things quite easily. We've got a section where they can upload and manage their portfolio items. We've got an AI portfolio building tool, and I'm going to be diving more into the AI stuff in the last video of this series, but one of the key things that Glide does incredibly well is it has all of these AI integrations, so you can actually build pretty phenomenal AI apps with this. And then we also have payments, and so here the way that the Unicorn Factory works is that freelancers can buy credits. Those credits will then top up their account, and that then gives them access to things like introductions on the job board or direct inquiries. All of this connects directly to Stripe, so whenever someone gets redirected here, it just takes them straight to a Stripe checkout, and it all works very, very seamlessly. But at a nutshell, that is pretty much how the portal works. I mean, for me, once again, the key problem that I was trying to solve for myself is just to allow my customers to self-manage their accounts. That includes the ability to update profiles, the ability to, basically simplify the process of connecting them with clients. And so Glide does that very well, because essentially what happens here is whenever they change information, it automatically sends these updates to Airtable, and it essentially allows me to connect freelancers and clients a lot easier. Now, I'm going to start off by giving you a very, very, very quick crash course in how to set up Glide apps. But before I do, I just want to remind you one more time that you don't really need to dive into building user portals until you're at the point where you actually have a lot of users. Glide is by far the most expensive no-code tool that I am using. It is incredibly good value in my opinion, considering how much time and energy and money it actually saves me. However, this is something that would probably get very expensive very fast if you're not at the stage yet where you're generating revenue for your business. So it's very important to make sure that you do the first 3 steps first and basically get to the point where you're generating some money somehow. It doesn't have to be your final business model. Like when I'm doing it on the Unicorn Factory Canada, I'm actually concierging a lot of the service just because it's a way easier way to generate cash flow fast. So again, just keep that in mind before you jump into these tools thinking that they're going to be somewhat cheap. Glide is not cheap. It is the most expensive no-code tool that I use, especially if you're building portals for a lot of users. So again, just make sure that you're doing these things in the right order. With that being said, there are a few ways to build Glide apps. First of all, we're going to start off with a blank app, and then we can essentially select data sources. Now, in most cases, if you're already building with Airtable, you can actually just use Airtable as your data source to get started. But in certain instances, you might just want to use Glide's native database tool, which is called Glide Big Tables. And eventually, it will make more sense to fully move over to that. I know that there may be some integrations coming very soon where it will be easier for you to integrate Glide Big Tables with, say, your Airtable base without actually having to make Airtable your data source. In case you're wondering why it doesn't just make sense to just connect Airtable. Airtable and Glide sometimes have syncing issues, not always, and there are 100% ways around it. But sometimes if you want to create a more snappy experience, I think you're just going to get more value from using Glide Big Tables. And so ultimately, for the sake of this example, we'll start off with this. So first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to have a look at the database that is created. Okay, so the first thing that will happen is a default app will be created for you, and you can basically just delete all of the default settings by going over to the navigation panel and then just hitting delete. There will also be a bunch of default tables that will be created for you. So we've got categories and items. We can just delete that as well. But one table that we don't want to delete is our users table. So the users table is going to reflect the people who have access to our app. So in here, what we can do is we could add someone, let's say Sam Jones. And as soon as we have, someone's email address in here, we've actually added a new user, and that user will now be able to log in. So whenever someone comes to your URL, okay, so first of all, you'll have to publish the app, but whenever someone comes to your app, they'll have some options to sign in. So this is what the sign in will look like. They'll click on continue, and what will happen is Glide will send them a pin, and then from there, they just enter the pin into the app, and then they'll be good to go. So let me just test this one more time with Connor at unicornfactory.nz. So the reason why that didn't work is because I have not yet set up the rules for who can access our app, but I'll show you that in a second. But this is essentially how it works. You just click that button, sends an email. Now you'll want to jump into the users and authentication section, and you want to basically determine the privacy section. You want to basically determine who has access to your app. Now, you can choose between having a private app and a public app. In most cases, what you'll want is a public app, because you'll want people who are not yet in your user table to be able to sign up so that they can apply for things. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch to public, and then sign in, we have required sign in. So really that is the starting point. Public app, required sign in. Okay. Now, you can enable them to log in with Google if you want. That's fully an option. I don't think it shows in the previewer, but if you allow sign in with Google, they'll be able to sign in with their email. I personally don't use it. I just use the send pins from Glide. And if you want to personalize it, you can actually also send the pins from your personal Gmail account, and that kind of makes it quite nice, makes it quite professional. Okay, the next thing is when it comes to changing the styles of your app, there's quite a bit of flexibility with it. I mean, not as much flexibility as you'll get in, say, something like Webflow, but enough for it to be pretty cool. So what you can do is you can change the color. If you want to look at what it looks like with the layout of your app like this, you can set that up. You can also, determine whether you want it to be like dark mode or light mode. Again, bunch of options. You've got, environment settings, like I want my app to always be light, I want it to always be dark, or I want it to rotate based on the system settings that a user has. Background, a whole thing, a bunch of things. Now, one of the things that I really like about this is that because Glide doesn't allow you to change the designs that much, you actually don't waste that much time on the design side of things. So really, what I would do is just get started with it. But at the end, I'm going to show you another nice little feature that Glide has that actually allows you to customize quite a lot. So for now, we're just going to leave it at that. Now, the next thing that you're going to want to do is to configure your database. Now, let's say, for example, the app that we're building here is, say, a marketplace directory for hiring freelancers, and this here is our client account. So what you'd do is you'd create a table for your freelancers, and then you can start adding information. So let's go talent 1, and then you'd go ahead and you'd add talent 2, and then you'd add talent 3. And if you wanted to add more fields, it works in a very similar way to Airtable. You just go in here and you'll say like, okay, I want a field where I want to display the location. So we'll go, Tokyo, then we'll go, Washington, and then we'll go Berlin. And now, as soon as you have this table in here, what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to start creating your interfaces. So the way it works is you just start off with a custom screen, and then in this custom screen, you can then start importing components. So let's say, for example, we want to import a list of all of the talent on our site. So we'll drop in a list, just like that. And by default, it's just going to select the user table. But what we'll do is we'll switch it over to the Freelancer table. And you can now see how it automatically imports this list. Okay, so what we can do here is we can start configuring our app a bit. So if we want to, for example, have the name of the talent, and then below that we want the location, we can actually reference values inside of that table. And so you can see here, it automatically updates it. You can also add images. Again, you won't have 100% control of what the actual component looks like, but this is honestly more than enough to get started. And so really what you want to do then is just go through your app and, styling different components, Again, the secret with these tools is honestly to just play around with them, watch tutorials, rebuild things. That's how I learned. That's how I recommend anyone learn. But yeah, you can then just start importing data in whatever way you want, and it's all quite neat. Also, one of the things that you can do is you can configure actions. Now, by default, whenever you import actions, Glide will just set default actions. I usually like to turn them off and like to customize them. But let's say, for example, we wanted to create a feature where we can message someone. So what we can do is we can add what's called a collection item action, which basically says, hey, this is an action for every single item within our list. And let's just go and say, let's just say send message. Now, by default, it's going to pick an action. So in this case, it's got the show notification action. So when I click this button now, you'll see at the bottom how it just shows me a notification. But we can actually change our action to something completely different. Okay. Now, one of the actions that we could add is to show a form screen. Okay. Now, we can select whether or not we want it to slide in or if we want it to be an overlay, but let's just select overlay. And what we will want to do now is, let's say we want to send this particular talent a message, okay? What we can do is we can create a new table, and we're just going to go and call this table message. And what we'll do in here is we'll basically send them a message. So let's just add a field, we'll call it message. And we also want to pass through who the client is. So we'll go client ID, and then we'll also identify who the freelancer ID is so that we know who the person is that received the message. And so the way that you would then do it is you'd click on send message, it would bring up a form, and now you can basically determine where you want the message to be sent to. And so we want to send this information to the message table, just like that. And so then by default, what Glide will do is it will import the information from your table, and you can then start populating it. So in this particular case, we want to send a message. So I want to say something like, hey, I want to hire you, or whatever. Now, here's the thing. We can now also populate the client ID and the freelancer ID, but obviously we don't want them to fill it out. We want it to be filled out. And so what we can actually do is we can actually use some special values in Glide. So the first one is called values from screen, and the values from screen basically pulls in the selected item. So in this case, talent 1, and it then pulls in the name of this particular column. And so what we want to do is we want to take the name field from this selected item, and we want to store it in the freelancer ID section. Now, another special field that Glide has that is very useful for this particular use case is the user profile fields. So you can see here it says values from user profile, and what we can do is we can just select the email of the logged in user. Okay, so if I'm logged in as Connor Finlayson, it will use the email address inside of my user table. And what I want to do is I want to populate my email address in the client ID field like that. Now, because we have these two fields, we can actually delete the text entry fields. And now when I hit the submit button, what will happen is it will automatically add a row inside of my database where it automatically pulls in the client ID, which is my name here, and the freelancer ID. Now, in case you're wondering, well, okay, how can I, how can I now display my messages inside of my portal? Now, one of the features that that Glide has in here is that you can use a similar feature to linked records and Airtables, and they refer to it as relations. And so the way it works is you can basically say, hey, I want this client record, and I want you to select the client record where the client ID, so the client ID is this value here, matches the value inside of the email field in the user table. And just like that, you'll see, hey, it automatically pulls up my link. Now, one of the things that you'll need to keep in mind straight off the bat is that Glide doesn't have an automatic two-way relationship the same way that you'd have it inside of Airtable when you're creating a linked record field. So what you're also going to have to do is going to create that relation on this side here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say messages, records, and what we're going to do is we're going to select the relations field, and we're going to say, hey, wherever my email, so connor@unicornfactory.nz, is being used inside of the message table under client ID, I want you to display the message, okay? And so what we're going to do is we're also going to select match multiple, because we know that a client might send multiple messages. But then what we can do with this particular linked record in here is we can also create a section inside of our app that allows us to display only those linked records. So what we would do is let's select our table, and instead of selecting one of our standard tables that we've got in here, we're going to select a special table, which is inside of our user profile, and it's inside of the messages records tab. And now what it will do is it will show me the message, and it will show me who I sent the information to. So we'll just go in here and we'll just write in talent, okay? And so if I now go ahead, send a message to this person, yo, Berlin, you'll see how it now automatically sends that message as well. And so without wanting to go crazy with how Glide works, because there's so much to it, you can now jump in and you can set up custom workflows for notifying freelancers that they received a message and so on. And so in a nutshell, there's so much about Glide to uncover. And if you do want to learn more about it, let me tell you about a course in So inside the MVMP labs, there are a bunch of tutorials specifically towards Glide, how you can use things like Stripe subscription, all that kind of stuff. But if you just want to get a handle of the basics of Glide, you can actually try to rebuild our board breakers project. And so what we'll do is we'll go through the process of setting up a user portal for a two-sided marketplace. Now, this is an older legacy course. However, all of the stuff that I show you in here is still pretty relevant and up to date. There have been some new features that Glide has launched since I made these videos, but when it comes to understanding the basics, this is really all you need to know. So what I'll do is I'll actually just walk you through the step-by-step process of how I created board breakers, which is a coaching marketplace for hiring chess coaches, and you'll basically see how it all works together. And really, while I don't think that another tutorial is the answer to everything, it will definitely put you in a position where you'll get the hang of Glide a lot quicker, and that will put you in a way better position to start building out the portal side of your marketplace. Now, with all of that being said, let's dive back into Glide to have a talk about the best place for you to get started. Now, there are a lot of different things that you can do inside of Glide portals, as you have probably seen by now. But one of the most important things that you'll probably need early on when you start having sellers on your site is to create the functionality where users can potentially manage their profiles themselves. That was one of the main things that required me to essentially build user portals or user accounts when I started the Unicorn Factory. So one thing that I'd recommend doing is to just focus on one portal first, and to then just create the ability for users to log in and to update their profiles. So all you'll need to do is just create a one-pager, add an update button in there, and then from there just allow them to make changes, and whenever they submit the form, it automatically syncs it back into your Airtable database. Now, as soon as you figure out the basics behind that, you'll be able to start setting up workflows where it then automatically updates your Webflow CMS, which is obviously a super important one if you have public-facing profiles for your talent in your marketplace. And it will also just lay the foundation for all of the additional features to come. Now, one of the things things that I think is also a great starting point is just to go ahead and rebuild apps that you find. There's some really great tutorials online, and I'll link to them down below, where you can basically learn how to build out entire Glide apps. And if you're someone that kind of struggles to get the hang of tools, my recommendation is to actually not try and start off with your app first. I would actually just learn how to use the tool by rebuilding apps. And there are a whole bunch of people that I'll point you towards. For example, Marco from Low Code has an incredible Glide community, and he makes incredible tutorials on YouTube on how to use Glide and build out entire apps, like super advanced ones. And so I'll point you in that direction. And yeah, that's essentially where I'd start. I'd start off by just really having a play around with Glide. And once you're comfortable with, how you set up different parts of the app, then what I would do is I would start to look into how you can then start building out the first version of your portal by creating just a way for your customers to manage their profiles themselves. Okay, this was a long video, but it is a pretty phenomenal app. So hopefully you found it useful. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments down below. Other than that, I'll see you back for the next one. Bye.